I'm here to talk today about generous listening and curiosity. So it's the kind of thing that seems pretty simple, but it's very difficult to walk that talk, to really be present and be able to receive. That's why I chose Across the Universe, was that feeling of just being able to receive and observe and just notice everything that is around you. So for me, this journey started 2 months ago, and I kind of see this as just the continuation of the conversation we have every week here at Circle of Miracles. Those of you who have known me and worked with me, I see Janet and Sherry here and Janelle. I'm very curious about storytelling and the hero's journey. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. Play, Casey was here talking about acting and improv and play. That has been a very big part of my world as well too. So mindfulness, all of this. So this conversation is really just a continuation of what we've been experiencing every week here. And I watch, I listen, and the sparks that come every week have been very meaningful for me. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the spiritual lessons I've learned through being an actor and being an acting teacher, and talk a little bit about my journey with respect to curiosity and how curiosity has been a big part of my spiritual journey as well. So I learned about 10 years ago that the Chinese character for listening involves the ear and the world. So in order to enter somebody else's world, we use the tool of our ears. So being able to step into somebody's world, be able to let go, of your world for a moment and truly be with somebody and be in their world, that is an intriguing proposition. In about 2 more years, there's going to be 8 billion people in this world. So that means there's 8 billion worlds, and we can explore that. And again, that's where Across the Universe, a million eyes, the light, a million suns, so much abundance. So the choice to be curious about that, I have found, has been kind of somewhat of a superpower. A lot of discourse that I see, a lot of these mental traps that I see out there, especially politically and socially, is about these power struggles, forcing ideology upon someone, when curiosity just kind of opens up and allows the worlds to unite. So I learned that through acting, through drama. Some of the biggest lessons I've learned was it's the biggest secret to acting, to being able to do it authentically and to really be present, was to understand that 98% of acting is just listening. It's just listening. Another lesson I learned was that acting is living truthfully under imaginary circumstances. So the imaginary circumstance can be anything. It could be a script. It can be the stories that we're telling ourselves about another person or about a spiritual path or whatever. Another lesson I learned was you're on point when your heart is hot and your head is calm, your head is cool. So these are all things that I learned as an actor, but it wasn't just a lesson in acting, it was a lesson in life. And one of the most important lessons I've learned was when my teacher asked me, who is the most important person in a scene? Who is the most important person in the scene? When the class kind of thought about that for a moment. It's the writer? No. It's yourself? No. It's the director? No. The important person, the most important person in the scene is always the other person. So that's where deep listening comes in. So when I first started talking to Reverend Cindy and Ken about this talk today, my intention was originally to start with day one when I started learning acting in college. But as I was reviewing and as I was considering what I wanted to share with you today was that there was a backstory that even went into that. So when I first showed up at college, they told me you have to take a basic acting class. You know, you can take any of the classes you want, but you have to take a basic acting class first. And I was resistant to that. I was pretty full of myself, honestly, at 19 years old. I'm like, you know, I've been doing this for 5 years. I've played lead roles in professional theater. I don't need a basic acting class. It's like, well, if you want to take theater in this department, you have to take a basic acting class first. So this was not easy for me. this was not easy on my ego. When I was 15, I started professional theater, and I realized from the latter part of 1991 to early part of 1992, I had performed in front of an audience 250 times, 250 times. And I sat and I watched and I listened. The first 6 months of that was in a production of Fiddler on the Roof, where that was about the Jewish struggle. Some nights I was the boy who left his entire identity, his entire national identity, to marry the Jewish girl. And some nights I was the oppressor. Some nights I was the one who ruined the lives of the people in the culture. So after that, I was a part of the Continental Congress in a production called 1776. So I signed the Declaration of Independence about 40 times, over 40 performances. So I sat and I watched and I listened about the struggles that went into signing the document that birthed their country. You know, and slavery was a big part of that conversation in the beginning too. Then I was in a production of The Diary of Anne Frank. Every night I watched, listened, and Anne Frank became my best friend, you know, over 2 years in an attic. And then the Nazis came and took us away every night. And then I was a part of a production of Big River, which is the story of Huckleberry Finn. And I played many different roles of characters, some serious, some comedic, you know, depicting life in the South pre-Civil War. And I watched and I listened. And then I went into a performance of Brighton Beach Memoirs, where I played the young Neil Simon. And I watched my family struggle. I watched my brother lose his job. I watched my father have a heart attack. I watched my mother and her sister argue. And I watched and I listened. And I felt like over the course of that year, I lived 6 lifetimes. I lived 6 lifetimes. And when I went to college, my decision was to double major in religion and theater. That was my decision at the time. Because another life I had lived was as Jesus's youngest brother in a fictional play about what was life really like, you know, being the brother of this prophet. So my plan was to you know, to write compelling fiction, dramatic fiction about that internal struggle, about having this, you know, this sibling, this brother, you know, who had all this attention. So I went to college, and it was really interesting because it can be kind of summarized what my experience was like there as a double major of religion and theater. There were 3 dorm rooms. There was I went to Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee, which was a Christian school, Christian university, and there was 3 dorm halls there. There was Heron, Pembroke, and Hale. Pembroke was known as Purgatory. I'm sorry, Pembroke was known as Purgatory because that's where you were when you were kind of like a sophomore, junior, and you know, you were kind of moving up. Heron was known as Heaven. I think that's where a lot of the music business majors were, and where a lot of the focus on, you know, the real Christian life, you know, was kind of experienced there. Hale was hell. That was where my dorm was. And that was also where the theater department was. The theater department was on the bottom floor, you know, in this dark black box. So there was this real mix of culture, really, where you know, I would attend a lot of my religious studies kind of on the nice section, down at the beautiful part of the campus. But hell was where the theater department was, where more of the liberal thinking people were more of the, you know, the non-traditionalists were. So I sat down in the head of the department's office, and you know, trying to talk him out of making me take a basic acting class. So so I wasn't getting out of it, and I went, and the first day I was introduced to this technique called the Meisner Technique. Is named after Sanford Meisner, neighborhood playhouse in New York City, and it was my first taste of this technique that frustrated everybody who ever learned it, because they couldn't wrap their mind around it. It was beyond wrapping your mind around it. It was about, you know, listening and feeling. You know, so the professor singled me out to demonstrate this technique on, and he said, "All I want you to do is repeat after me. I don't want you to perform. I don't want you to, you know, do anything out of the ordinary. All I want you to do is just repeat." You know, so he looked and he saw that I had an old pair of Chuck Taylors on. He said, "Got an old pair of Chucks on." I'm like, he said, "You got an old pair of Chucks on." What? Just repeat after me. You've got an old pair of Chucks on. I got an old pair of Chucks on. You got an old pair of Chucks on. I got an old pair of Chucks on. So this went on for like 10 minutes probably. And I'm like, what is the effing point of this? What is the effing point of this? I don't get it. He's like, "You're not supposed to get it." This is your first exposure to something like this. I don't want you to think, I want you to feel. Oh God, that frustrated me. Oh God, that frustrated me. And that was all we did for weeks. For weeks. Students dropped out because it was just, you know, we're not doing any script work. We're not doing any character development. We're not doing anything, you know. And the teacher was like, "You're doing everything." It forces you to listen. It forces you to observe. So as I kind of embraced that vulnerability, I realized that was kind of what the spiritual was for me, was that we think we know. We think we know what we know, but what we don't know that we don't know is so vast, is so vast. And that's what listening is. That's why the most important person in the scene is the other person. And worlds get to merge that way. You know, again, almost 8 billion people in this world, and they all have their own realities. And being able to step into that is something that takes deep listening and observation. So years went by. I actually ended up falling in love with that technique. I learned from different teachers more about that technique. And then eventually you get to the point where you start applying it to scene work, and you start applying it to story. And then you start to be able to observe the emotions in someone else. And then you get to observe how those emotions affect you. And you kind of peel away the layers of the assumptions. You get out of the story that you're telling yourself, and you really start to be present to what is real. And that was another lesson that I was learning. It's like, I don't care what you do, just as long as it's real. Just as long as it's real. So as I progressed and I started learning this technique more, and they said it takes 20 years. It really takes 20 years to do it right, to do it well. And probably around the time I had been practicing it about 20 years, I met a teacher named Brian Drillinger, who directed a play at the Steel River Playhouse in Pottstown, where I did a performance. And he went, you know, he kind of reintroduced me to this technique again. And that's when I started really kind of layering that upon the spiritual. I was studying Course of Miracles at that time, actually. And I was really centered and delving into this concept of grandeur and grandiosity. And what that means to me is like grandiosity seems like it's the imitation of spirit, where grandeur is the authentic experience of spirit. For me, when I was in my grandiosity phase, especially when I first started school, acting was about success. Acting was about acting was about becoming a famous actor. Acting was about becoming a marketing myself. But grandeur was about falling in love with the art, was falling in love with communication. So about having real conversation. And that's what theater came to be for me, was that it's just about communication. It's just about peeling away the layers and getting to what's real. And so that informs me with a lot of my relationships today with Janet. I see Janet's here. We do a play about suicide and bullying and open up the conversation about that. Sherry's here. We do something called authentic improv, where we use these fun skills to just get to the truth, to just get to what's honest, to what's real. So yeah, that's kind of been where the curiosity comes in. One of my favorite games that we play in like improv situations is the question game, questions only. So all you're allowed to do is ask questions during this. So I've come to appreciate that it's not what you know. It's not what you know. It's what you're exploring. And this tied into a lot of things I was learning at the time as well about coaching and about philosophy, was that life doesn't really respond to your demands. Sometimes it might, conform to that, because that is, the creator or the universe's, will. There's an alignment there. But there's more immediate feedback when you're asking questions. So what is the highest intention? What does this make possible? How can we make that fun and enjoyable? How do we really process some of the deep stuff that's going on here and make that enjoyable? How do we really be present with someone? So these are some of these questions that I'm starting to play with my son now. My son is very inquisitive. My son is very inquisitive, and we play these games all the time. And something that he helped me discover, because he's 4 years old, and he's starting to kind of understand some pretty mature themes right now. We're actually reading and watching the Harry Potter books and movies. And he's constantly asking me, Daddy, is he a bad guy or is he a good guy? I said, well, what do you think? What I think is that I think good people consistently make choices that help people. Bad people are people who probably make choices who hurt people. But that doesn't mean you can't, make different decisions. So these are some of the things that I'm talking to my 4-year-old about, and some of the things that where that questioning, the questions only, comes into play about, where is there real alignment? What's real? And that's the big question too. What is real?